The morning mist hung heavy over the marble corridors of Valdoria Palace as Queen Consort Elena made her way to the morning prayers. Her silk slippers made no sound against the polished floors, a skill she had learned during her 15 years as the king's second wife. In this palace, silence was often the difference between favor and ruin. Elena paused before the great mirror in the eastern hall, adjusting the sapphire crown that had belonged to the previous queen consort. The reflection staring back at her showed a woman of 38, still beautiful despite the worry lines that had appeared around her green eyes over the past months. Her auburn hair was perfectly arranged, her posture regal, but those who knew her well could see the tension in her shoulders. The kingdom of Valdoria had not known peace in recent months. King Marcus, her husband of 12 years, had grown increasingly suspicious of everyone around him. The war with the neighboring kingdom of Asturia had drained the royal treasury, and whispers of rebellion echoed through the castle halls. In times like these, the king's paranoia became a dangerous weapon that could strike anyone. Elena's family, the House of Ravencrest, had always been powerful nobles in Valdoria. Her father, Duke Aldrich, controlled vast lands in the northern provinces. Her 3 brothers held important positions in the military and government. Her younger sister, Lady Isabella, served as one of Elena's ladies-in-waiting. The family's influence had helped secure Elena's marriage to the king, but now that same influence had become a source of suspicion. As Elena entered the prayer hall, she noticed the absence of several familiar faces. Lord Garrett, who usually led the morning prayers, was nowhere to be seen. Lady Margaret, one of her closest friends, had mysteriously fallen ill 3 days ago and hadn't been seen since. The hall felt empty, cold, despite the dozens of nobles and courtiers who filled the wooden pews. King Marcus arrived exactly at the 7th bell, as was his custom. At 52, he remained an imposing figure despite the gray that now streaked his black hair and beard. His dark eyes swept across the assembled court with the intensity of a hawk searching for prey. When his gaze fell upon Elena, she offered a gentle smile, but he looked away quickly, his jaw tightening. The prayers proceeded in Latin, the ancient words echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Elena found herself studying her husband's profile as he knelt beside her. When had he become this stranger? When they first married, Marcus had been a different man, stern but fair, passionate about his kingdom's welfare. The endless pressures of rule had changed him, hardened him into someone she barely recognized. After prayers, the royal couple walked in silence toward the breakfast hall. The king's personal guard, Captain Rodriguez, fell into step behind them, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. Elena had noticed how the captain's men had increased their presence around the palace in recent weeks, where once she could walk freely through her own home. Now she found armed men at every corner. "Your Majesty," came a voice from behind them. Elena turned to see her brother, Sir Edmund, approaching with quick strides. At 28, Edmund was the youngest of her brothers and served as the king's advisor on military matters. His usually cheerful face was grave this morning. "Brother," Elena greeted him warmly, but she noticed how King Marcus's expression darkened at Edmund's approach. "My king, my queen," Edmund bowed formally. "I bring urgent news from the northern borders. The Duke of Asturia has moved 3,000 men closer to our territories. Father requests permission to mobilize our forces in response." King Marcus stopped walking. The silence stretched uncomfortably long as he studied Edmund's face. "Your father requests many things lately," the king said finally, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Perhaps too many things." Edmund's brow furrowed in confusion. "My king, I don't understand. The Duke serves only Valdoria's interests." "Does he?" Marcus's question hung in the air like a blade. "Tell me, Sir Edmund, when did your family's loyalty to Valdoria begin to require so many private meetings? So many whispered conversations that end abruptly when others approach?" Elena felt her heart skip a beat. She had noticed the same thing. Her family members had been acting strangely lately, speaking in hushed tones, meeting privately. She had assumed they were discussing wedding plans for Isabella, who had recently become engaged to Lord Henry of Westmarch. "My king," Elena interjected gently, placing her hand on her husband's arm. "Surely you don't suspect my family of any wrongdoing? They have served the crown faithfully for generations." Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm, then slowly, deliberately. He stepped away from her touch. The gesture felt like a physical blow. Have they, Elena? Or have they served themselves while wearing the mask of loyalty? The breakfast hall fell silent as the royal couple entered. Servants hurried to pull out chairs and arrange plates, but the usual morning chatter among the courtiers had died. Elena took her seat at the king's right hand, as was proper, but she felt the distance between them like a chasm. As they ate in tense silence, a commotion arose from the main entrance. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hall as Captain Rodriguez entered with 6 of his men. Behind them walked a figure Elena recognized with growing dread, Sir Thomas Blackwood, the king's spy master. Sir Thomas was a thin, pale man whose soft voice and gentle manner concealed one of the sharpest minds in the kingdom. He approached the royal table and bowed low. "Your Majesty, I bring news that requires your immediate attention." King Marcus set down his goblet. "Speak." "We have intercepted correspondence that suggests treasonous activity within the palace walls. Letters have been passing between certain noble houses and our enemies in Asturia." Elena's blood ran cold. She watched her husband's face carefully, but his expression revealed nothing. "What manner of correspondence?" Sir Thomas produced a leather portfolio from his robes. "Details about our military positions, information about the Treasury's condition, plans for upcoming troop movements, all information that could prove devastating if it reached Asturian hands." "Who?" The king's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried across the silent hall. "The investigation is ongoing, Your Majesty. However, the evidence suggests involvement from those with access to the highest levels of government, those who attend council meetings, who have access to military briefings, who could move freely within the palace without suspicion." Elena realized she was holding her breath. Around the hall, she could see faces pale as courtiers realized the implications. Anyone could be under suspicion. Anyone could be next. "Continue your investigation, Sir Thomas," King Marcus commanded. "Leave no stone unturned. I want the truth, regardless of where it leads or whom it implicates." "Of course, Your Majesty. However, I should mention that we have already identified certain patterns in the correspondence. The handwriting, the type of parchment used, even the wax seals all point to sources within specific noble houses." Elena found herself gripping the edge of the table. She thought of her family's recent secretive behavior, their whispered conversations, their mysterious meetings. Surely they weren't involved in treason. But doubt crept into her mind like poison. The rest of breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence. When the meal ended, King Marcus stood abruptly. "Captain Rodriguez, double the guard around the palace. No one enters or leaves without my personal approval. Elena, you will remain in your chambers until further notice." "Marcus, what?" Elena began, but the king had already turned away. "For your own protection," he added without looking back, but his tone suggested something far more ominous. As Elena was escorted to her chambers by 2 guards, she passed her sister Isabella in the corridor. Isabella's face was streaked with tears, and she reached out desperately toward Elena. "Sister, they've arrested Edmund. They came for him at dawn. Father and our other brothers have been confined to their estates." Elena felt the world tilt around her. "On what charges?" "Treason," Isabella whispered. They say he was passing information to Asturia about our defenses. The guards urged Elena forward, but she looked back at her sister. Isabella, you must tell me the truth. Has our family been involved in anything that could be seen as treasonous? Isabella's eyes were wide with fear and confusion. I don't know, Elena. I thought we were just planning my wedding, but now I realize there were conversations I wasn't included in. Meetings between father and our brothers that they never explained. Elena's mind raced as she was led to her chambers. The doubt that had been growing in her mind began to crystallize into terrible certainty. Her family had been acting strangely. There had been unexplained meetings, whispered conversations, mysterious letters arriving at odd hours. She had dismissed these things as normal family business, but now she saw them through different eyes. Once in her chambers, Elena paced the length of her sitting room. The walls that had once felt like home now seemed like a prison. 2 guards stood outside her door, ostensibly for protection, but she knew they were there to keep her confined. Hours passed slowly. Elena tried to read, tried to embroider, tried to pray, but her mind kept returning to the terrible possibilities. If her family was truly guilty of treason, what would happen to them? What would happen to her? In Valdoria, the penalty for treason was death. As evening approached, Lady Margaret appeared at Elena's door. Elena was surprised to see her friend, who had supposedly been ill for days. Margaret, Elena embraced her, grateful for any friendly face. I heard you were unwell. Margaret's expression was grim. I was being questioned, Elena. For 3 days, Sir Thomas and his men interrogated me about my conversations with you, with your family, with other courtiers. They wanted to know about every meeting I attended, every letter I wrote, every casual conversation I overheard. Elena sank into a chair, the full scope of the situation becoming clear. They suspect everyone connected to my family. It's worse than suspicion, Margaret said quietly. They have evidence, Elena. Letters in Edmund's handwriting detailing our military weaknesses, financial documents showing payments from Asturian sources to accounts linked to your father. Sir Thomas showed me proof that your family has been selling information to our enemies for months. Elena felt physically ill. That can't be true. Edmund would never betray Valdoria. None of them would. The evidence suggests otherwise, Margaret said sadly. And Elena, there's more. They found correspondence that suggests you might have known about these activities. That's impossible. Elena stood abruptly, pacing again. I knew nothing about any treason. Yes, my family was acting strangely lately, but I assumed it was wedding planning or business matters. Margaret watched her friend with sympathetic eyes. I believe you, Elena, but the king is beyond reason right now. His paranoia has consumed him. He sees enemies everywhere, and your family's actual guilt has confirmed his worst fears about everyone around him. A knock at the door interrupted them. Captain Rodriguez entered, his expression apologetic but firm. Your Majesty, I'm sorry to disturb you, but the king requests your presence in the Great Hall immediately. Elena's hands trembled as she adjusted her dress and crown. Whatever was about to happen would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she loved. She had married King Marcus for love, or so she had believed at the time. Now she wondered if that love would be enough to save her family, or herself. As she walked through the palace corridors toward an uncertain future, Elena could not have imagined that within hours, everything she had ever known would come crashing down around her, and she would find herself facing the most devastating betrayal of her life. The great hall of Valdoria Palace had witnessed many momentous occasions: coronations, royal weddings, declarations of war, treaties of peace. But as Queen Consort Elena entered that evening, she knew she was walking into something that would overshadow them all. The massive chamber, with its soaring ceiling and stained glass windows depicting the kingdom's glorious history, felt more like a courtroom than a royal reception hall. King Marcus sat upon his throne, the crown of Valdoria catching the light from hundreds of candles arranged throughout the hall. The golden circlet, embedded with emeralds and diamonds, had been worn by his ancestors for 3 centuries. Now it seemed to weigh heavily upon his brow, adding years to his already careworn face. The hall was packed with nobles, courtiers, and officials. Elena recognized most of the faces, people she had dined with, laughed with, considered friends. Tonight they avoided her gaze, their expressions ranging from pity to fear to cold judgment. She realized with growing horror that many of them had already made up their minds about her guilt or innocence. Sir Thomas Blackwood stood beside the throne, his pale hands holding a thick folder of documents. Captain Rodriguez and his guards were positioned strategically throughout the hall, their hands resting on their sword hilts. The message was clear. This was not merely a royal audience, but a trial. Elena approached the throne and performed the traditional curtsy, her training in royal protocol serving her even as her world crumbled around her. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. King Marcus studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Elena, Consort Queen of Valdoria, you stand before this assembly to hear charges of the gravest nature brought against your family, the House of Ravencrest." The formal tone of his words struck her like a physical blow. This was not Marcus, her husband of 12 years, speaking to her. This was the King of Valdoria, dispensing royal justice. "Sir Thomas," the king continued, "present the evidence." The spy master stepped forward, opening his folder with deliberate ceremony. "Your Majesty, lords and ladies of the court, what I present tonight is proof of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of our kingdom. For the past 8 months, members of the House of Ravencrest have been in secret communication with agents of Asturia, our sworn enemy." A murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. Elena felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to remain standing. Sir Thomas withdrew a letter from his folder. "This correspondence, written in Sir Edmund's hand, details the placement of our border fortifications. The information contained within led directly to the Asturian raid on Fort Meridian last month, which cost us 47 soldiers' lives." Elena gasped audibly. The attack on Fort Meridian had been a devastating blow to Valdoria's defenses, but she had never imagined it could be connected to her family. "Furthermore," Sir Thomas continued, "we have bank records showing payments of 5,000 gold pieces to accounts controlled by Duke Aldrich, payments that originated from Asturian sources and coincided exactly with the dates when sensitive military information was passed to our enemies." The spy master presented document after document, each one more damning than the last. Letters discussing troop movements, detailed maps of castle defenses, financial records showing suspicious transactions. The evidence formed a web of treachery that seemed to implicate every male member of Elena's family. "Your Majesty," Elena finally found her voice, stepping forward despite the guards who moved to block her path, "I beg you to consider that this evidence, while seemingly damning, may not tell the complete story. My family has served Valdoria faithfully for generations. Surely their loyalty has earned them the right to defend themselves against these accusations." King Marcus's eyes flashed with something that might have been pain, but his voice remained cold. "They have had that opportunity, Elena. Each member of your family was given the chance to explain these documents, to provide alternative explanations for their actions. Their responses have been insufficient." "Where are they now?" Elena demanded, her fear making her bold. "Where is my father, my brothers? Why am I not allowed to see them, to hear their side of these accusations?" "Your father and 2 of your brothers are confined to the Tower of Sorrows, awaiting final judgment," the king replied. Sir Edmund has confessed to his crimes in exchange for a more merciful death." The words hit Elena like arrows. The Tower of Sorrows was where Valdoria kept its most dangerous traitors before their execution. The fact that Edmund had confessed suggested that the evidence against him was overwhelming, or that the torture had been too much to bear. "Your Majesty," Elena pleaded, falling to her knees before the throne, "I swear by all that is holy that I knew nothing of these activities. If my family has betrayed you, they have betrayed me as well. I am as much a victim of their deception as you are." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Elena could hear her own heartbeat as she waited for the king's response. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The guilt of the House of Ravencrest is established beyond doubt," King Marcus declared. "But the question remains, what of you, Elena? Were you an innocent victim of your family's treachery, or were you complicit in their crimes?" Sir Thomas stepped forward again. "Your Majesty, while we found no direct evidence of the Queen Consort's involvement in passing information to our enemies, there are troubling connections." Elena's heart pounded as the spy master continued. "The Queen's personal correspondence includes several letters to her family that discuss family matters and private concerns in language that could be interpreted as coded messages. Additionally, several of the meetings between the conspirators took place in the Queen's private gardens, and witnesses report seeing her in conversation with her brothers immediately before some of the most sensitive information was passed to Asturian agents." "Those were innocent family conversations," Elena protested. "We discussed Isabella's wedding, estate management, normal family business. And of course I spoke with my brothers. They are my family." "Perhaps," Sir Thomas conceded, "but the timing is suspicious. Moreover, Your Majesty, there is the question of the Queen's continued loyalty. Even if she was not directly involved in the conspiracy, how can she remain faithful to a crown that has condemned her entire family? The bonds of blood run deep, and history teaches us that family loyalty often trumps loyalty to the throne." Elena felt the trap closing around her. Even her innocence was being twisted into evidence of potential guilt. She looked up at her husband, searching his face for any sign of the man she had loved, but found only the cold calculation of a king protecting his realm. "Marcus," she whispered, using his given name for the first time during the proceedings. "You know me. We have shared 12 years together, shared a bed, shared our dreams for this kingdom. You know I am not capable of treason." For just a moment, the king's mask slipped, and Elena saw the pain in his eyes, but then his expression hardened again. "I know that I loved a woman I believed to be loyal and honest," he said quietly. "But I also know that love can blind a man to the truth. I cannot allow my personal feelings to compromise the security of Valdoria." Lord Chancellor Williams, an elderly man who had served 3 kings, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if I may speak, the law is clear regarding treason. Those found guilty must forfeit their lives and all their property to the crown. However, in cases where family members may have been unwitting accomplices or victims themselves, the law allows for alternative punishments." Elena seized on this glimmer of hope. "Yes, Your Majesty. I will accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate for my family's crimes, even though I committed none myself. I will withdraw from court, live quietly, whatever you require." King Marcus was silent for long minutes, his fingers drumming against the arm of his throne. When he finally spoke, his words shattered Elena's last hope. "The House of Ravencrest has committed the ultimate betrayal. They sold the lives of Valdorian soldiers for gold. They put this entire kingdom at risk for personal gain. Such treachery cannot be forgiven, and it cannot be allowed to continue." He stood, and the entire hall fell to their knees, except for Elena, who remained frozen before the throne. "Therefore, By the authority vested in me by God and the ancient laws of Valdoria, I hereby decree the complete dissolution of the House of Ravencrest. All lands, titles, and properties are forfeit to the crown. Duke Aldrich and his sons shall be executed at dawn for high treason. Elena felt as if she couldn't breathe. Her father, her brothers, all of them condemned to die. Furthermore, the king continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, all members of the House of Ravencrest, by blood or by marriage, are hereby banished from the kingdom of Valdoria in perpetuity. They are forbidden from setting foot on Valdorian soil upon pain of death. They have one day to gather their personal belongings and depart our borders, never to return. The words echoed through the great hall like thunder. Elena finally understood the full scope of her destruction. Not only would her family die, but she would lose everything, her position, her home, her identity as Queen Consort. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, Marcus, you cannot do this. I am innocent of these crimes. I have given you 12 years of faithful service as your queen. I have supported you through wars, through political crises, through personal struggles. You cannot cast me aside like this." "I can, and I must," the king replied, but Elena heard the slight tremor in his voice. "The security of Valdoria demands it. A queen whose family has proven treasonous cannot remain on the throne, regardless of her personal innocence or guilt." Elena stood slowly, her legs shaking. "Then you are not just banishing me, Marcus. You are killing me. You are destroying everything I am, everything I have ever been." "You will be given safe passage to the border," the king said, avoiding her gaze. "You may take your personal belongings, your jewelry, enough gold to support yourself in exile. You will not be left destitute." "How generous," Elena said bitterly. "You take my family, my home, my identity, but you leave me with gold coins to remember what I once was." The king finally looked directly at her, and Elena saw tears in his eyes, but his voice remained firm. "The decree has been made. Guards, escort the former Queen Consort to her chambers to gather her belongings. She will depart at first light." As Captain Rodriguez stepped forward to carry out the order, Elena felt something break inside her. The man she had loved, the man she had given her life to, was casting her out like a stranger. Her family would die while she lived in exile, forever branded as the wife of traitors. "Wait!" she called out as the guards approached. "I have one final request, as your former queen and as the woman you once claimed to love." King Marcus nodded reluctantly. "Let me see them," Elena pleaded. "Let me see my father and brothers one last time before they die. Grant me this one mercy." The king was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might refuse even this small comfort. Finally, he spoke. "You may see them for 1 hour, under guard. But know this, Elena. When you leave this palace tomorrow, you leave forever. There will be no reprieve, no pardon, no return. You will be dead to us, as we must be dead to you." Elena nodded, tears finally starting to fall. "I understand, Your Majesty. I understand that the Marcus I married died tonight, along with everything else I held dear." As the guards surrounded her, Elena looked around the great hall one final time. These walls had been her home, these people, her world. Tomorrow she would walk away from all of it, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the memory of how completely she had been betrayed by the man she had trusted with her heart. The assembled court watched in silence as their former queen was led away, her head held high despite her tears. Many of them would later say it was the most heartbreaking sight they had ever witnessed. The destruction of a woman who had given everything for love, only to have that love turned into the instrument of her ruin. The dungeons beneath Valdoria Palace smelled of dampness, despair, and death. As Elena descended the narrow stone steps, Flanked by 4 guards carrying torches, she tried to prepare herself for what she would find. Nothing could have readied her for the sight that awaited her in the depths of the Tower of Sorrows. Her father, Duke Aldrich, sat chained to the wall of a cell barely large enough for a man to lie down. The proud nobleman, who had once commanded armies and managed vast estates, was now a broken figure. His hair, once perfectly groomed, hung in matted strands around his gaunt face. His fine clothes had been replaced with rough prison garb, stained with blood and filth. "Father," Elena whispered through the iron bars. Aldrich looked up slowly, as if the simple act of raising his head required enormous effort. When his eyes focused on Elena's face, she saw a mixture of love, shame, and devastating grief. "My daughter," he said, his voice hoarse from screaming during interrogation. "I had hoped they would not bring you here. I had hoped you would remember me as I was, not as I am now." Elena gripped the cold iron bars until her knuckles turned white. "Father, tell me the truth. Tell me what really happened. Were you truly involved in treason against Marcus?" Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, staring at his chained hands. When he finally spoke, his words shattered what remained of Elena's world. "Yes," he whispered. "God forgive me, yes. We sold information to Asturia. We took their gold and betrayed our own people." Elena staggered backward, as if he had struck her. "Why? Why would you do such a thing? We had everything: wealth, power, respect. Why risk it all?" Tears streamed down the old duke's weathered face. "Because we were fools, Elena. Greedy, ambitious fools who thought we could play games with kingdoms and come out winners. The war with Asturia was bankrupting the realm. We convinced ourselves that we were saving Valdoria by ensuring it would lose quickly, with minimal bloodshed. We told ourselves that a swift defeat was better than a long, grinding war that would destroy the kingdom entirely." "But the soldiers who died," Elena's voice broke. "The 47 men at Fort Meridian." "Their blood is on our hands," Aldrich admitted, his voice full of anguish. "We never intended for anyone to die. We thought we were providing information that would make Asturia's victory quick and decisive, ending the war before more lives were lost. We were wrong. We were so terribly, catastrophically wrong." Elena sank to her knees on the filthy dungeon floor. The father she had worshipped, the family she had trusted above all others, had indeed committed the ultimate betrayal. Everything Marcus had said was true. "What of Edmund?" she managed to ask. "What of my other brothers?" "Edmund was the first to realize what we had done," Aldrich said quietly. "When the news came of the massacre at Fort Meridian, he broke down completely. He tried to convince us to confess, to throw ourselves on the king's mercy, but we were too proud, too frightened. We thought we could cover our tracks, blame others. Edmund's confession was not coerced, daughter. He confessed because the guilt was eating him alive." Elena heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. She turned to see her brothers being brought from their separate cells. Sir Richard, the eldest, looked defiant even in chains. Sir William, the middle brother, appeared to be in a state of shock, his eyes vacant and staring. "Sister," Richard said when he saw her. His voice carried none of their father's remorse. "Have you come to gloat? To distance yourself from the family that gave you a crown?" "Richard!" Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. "Do not speak to your sister with such venom. She knew nothing of our activities. She is as much a victim of our choices as anyone." "Is she?" Richard's laugh was bitter. "She lived in luxury while we took the risks. She enjoyed the benefits of her position while we sacrificed our honor to maintain the family's power." Elena looked at her eldest brother with growing horror. There was no remorse in his face, no acknowledgement of the evil they had committed. Even now, facing death, he felt justified in his actions. "You still don't understand," she said quietly. "Even now, You don't see what you've done. You betrayed not just Marcus, not just the crown, but every person in this kingdom. Every soldier, every farmer, every child who depended on their leaders to protect them. Spare me the righteousness, Richard sneered. You think your precious Marcus is innocent in all this? Do you think his hands are clean? The taxes he imposed to fund this war drove families into poverty. The men he sent to die in foreign fields had wives and children who starved while he lived in luxury. We may have chosen the losing side, but at least we chose to end the suffering. By causing more suffering. Elena stood, her voice echoing off the stone walls. By selling our soldiers' lives for gold, by ensuring that good men died for nothing. The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Rodriguez. My lady, your time is nearly finished. The king has ordered that you must prepare for your departure. Elena looked at each member of her family one final time. Her father, consumed by guilt and shame. William, broken by the enormity of what they had done. Richard, unrepentant, even in the face of death. These were the men she had loved and trusted above all others, and they had betrayed not just their kingdom, but her faith in them. I forgive you, Father, she said quietly. Not for what you did to Valdoria, but for what you did to me. You raised me to believe in honor, in loyalty, in doing what is right regardless of the cost. The fact that you abandoned those principles doesn't mean they were false. It just means you were too weak to live by them when it mattered most. Aldrich reached through the bars toward his daughter, but the chains prevented him from touching her. Elena, my child, I am so sorry. I am sorry for the pain we have caused you, for the position we have put you in. I am sorry that our failures will cost you everything you have worked for. Elena stepped back, knowing that if she allowed herself to embrace him, she might never have the strength to leave. Goodbye, Father. I pray that death will bring you the peace that life could not. As the guards escorted her back up the stone steps, Elena heard Richard calling after her. Sister, when you are living in exile, remember that we did this for you too. Everything we did was to secure our family's future. Elena did not turn back. She climbed toward the palace above, carrying with her the terrible knowledge that her family's guilt was absolute. There would be no reprieve, no last-minute evidence of innocence. Tomorrow, she would watch the only family she had ever known die for their crimes. The night passed without sleep. Elena spent her final hours as Queen Consort of Valdoria, packing a single trunk with her most treasured possessions. Her wedding dress, a gift from Marcus when they were still happy, a locket containing a portrait of her mother, who had died when Elena was young, letters from friends, books she had loved, small mementos of a life that was ending forever. As dawn broke over the palace, Elena stood at her window watching the construction of the scaffold in the courtyard below. Soon, her father and brothers would die on that platform, while she was forced to leave the kingdom forever. The cruel irony was not lost on her. They would pay for their treason with their lives, while she, innocent of their crimes, would pay with a living death. Lady Isabella arrived to escort her to the palace gates. Elena's sister had aged years in a single night. Her eyes were red from weeping, her face pale and drawn. I've arranged for a carriage to take you to the border, Isabella said quietly, and I've hidden some additional gold in your trunk. It's not much, but it should help you establish yourself wherever you decide to go. What will happen to you? Elena asked, embracing her sister. I will marry Lord Henry as planned, Isabella replied. The king has been merciful enough to allow the marriage to proceed, though I must take my husband's name completely and renounce any claim to the Ravencrest legacy. I will become Isabella of Westmarch and try to forget I was ever Isabella Ravencrest. Elena understood. Isabella was being allowed to escape their family's disgrace by essentially ceasing to exist as a Ravencrest. It was a form of mercy, but also a form of death, the death of identity, of history, of belonging. The sisters walked together through the palace corridors for the last time. Servants and courtiers lined their path, but none spoke. Some watched with pity, others with relief that they had not been caught in the Ravencrest downfall. A few looked at Elena with something approaching admiration for the dignity with which she bore her destruction. King Marcus waited at the great doors of the palace, flanked by his guards. He wore his crown and royal robes, every inch the king dispensing justice. But Elena could see the cost of his decision in the lines around his eyes, in the way his hands shook slightly as he held his scepter. "Elena," he said formally as she approached. "Your Majesty," she replied, offering a perfect curtsy. They stood facing each other in silence, 12 years of marriage hanging between them like a blade. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Your carriage waits. You have safe passage to the border of Nethermarch, where you will find sanctuary. The gold I promised has been provided, along with letters of introduction to merchants who will help you establish a new life." Elena nodded. "Thank you for your generosity." "Elena," Marcus said quietly, stepping closer and lowering his voice so the guards could not hear. "I want you to know. I want you to understand." "I understand perfectly," Elena interrupted. "You are a king first, and a husband second. You made the choice that your crown demanded regardless of the cost to your heart." Marcus's composure cracked slightly. "If there had been any other way?" "There wasn't," Elena said firmly. "My family's guilt is absolute. Your judgment is just. I do not blame you for doing what you must to protect your kingdom." The king seemed about to say more, but Elena turned away. She could not bear to see the pain in his eyes, knowing that it changed nothing. She was still being banished. Her family was still going to die. Her life was still ending. As Elena walked toward her carriage, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. The entire court had gathered to witness the departure of their former queen. Some watched with pity, others with curiosity. A few with barely concealed satisfaction at seeing the mighty House of Ravencrest finally brought low. She placed her hand on the carriage door and turned back for one final look at the palace that had been her home. The morning sun struck the golden dome and made it shine like a beacon. It was beautiful, majestic. Everything a royal residence should be, and she would never see it again. The physical blow of that realization hit her like a fist to the chest. Elena staggered, her vision blurring as the full enormity of her loss crashed over her. Her family would be dead within hours. Her marriage was destroyed. Her identity as queen was gone forever. She had nowhere to go, no family to return to, no home to call her own. Her legs gave way beneath her, and Elena collapsed on the palace steps before the assembled court and guards. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was King Marcus stepping forward, his royal composure finally breaking as he called her name. But even as consciousness faded, she knew he would not, could not, save her. She was falling into an abyss from which there would be no return, and she was falling alone. When Elena awoke hours later, she was lying in her carriage, already miles from Valdoria Palace. Through the window, she could see unfamiliar countryside rolling past. Isabella sat across from her, tears streaming down her face. "The execution is over," Isabella said quietly. "Father and our brothers died with dignity. Edmund's last words were an apology to the families of the soldiers who died because of his actions." Elena closed her eyes and tried to feel something: grief, anger, relief. But there was only emptiness. The woman who had been Queen Consort Elena of Valdoria had died on those palace steps. The person who opened her eyes in this carriage was someone else entirely, someone without a past or a future, someone condemned to live as a ghost of what she had once been. As the carriage carried her toward an uncertain exile, Elena understood that some betrayals are so complete, so devastating, that they destroy not just what you have, but who you are. She had lost everything to the crimes of people she had loved and trusted, and the cruelest irony was that their betrayal of the kingdom paled in comparison to their betrayal of her faith in them. The former queen consort of Valdoria disappeared into history that day, leaving behind only whispered stories of a woman who had fallen so far and so completely that her collapse before the palace guards became a legend of tragic love and ultimate betrayal.